Skip Weber at the Weber Automotive Group.
We sell every Equinox and every Trax we can get. We can't keep them on the lot. They're so great. Production is good. Those are both imported, built in Mexico and Korea, so supply chain is still a little bit low. Chevrolet is moving the Equinox production back into the U.S., so that'll be good for us. We'll be able to get even more of them. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to finalize. We could always use more, and when we get enough, the Equinox is the best-selling vehicle in St. Louis without even a close second. And right now, the Trax could probably be there too because it's the least expensive vehicle you can buy of any brand. You got digital screen, you got all the options, nice radio, nice stereo, lots of room for what you think is a small vehicle. Really, really nice. So those are both total winners, and I know for a fact every other brand is jealous of those two vehicles. They wish they could compete with those two when we have enough of them.
Granite City, Columbia, Illinois, Olive and 270, and online at WeberChevrolet.com. The Weber Automotive Group.
To be telling tales out of school, but there's a feller in there who'll pay you $10 if you sing into his can.
I'm not here to make a record, you dumb cracker. They broadcast me out on the radio.
Smut, filth, and garbage. To some people, these are more than just three good things. For some folks, it's an entire way of life, and it's to these people, the everyday dirtball, that this is dedicated. To those of you unaccustomed to life in the gutter, you'd best grab a snorkel, 'cause we're going down.
I'm going to say a few things. I'm going to say some bad words. You're just going to have to deal with it.
Housekeeping?
I think you're sleeping.
No, I'm just getting warmed up.
And let me begin by wishing you a beautiful look.
Now, here's JC.
It is Sunday, October 26, 2025. How you doing, kids? You're on News Talk STL 101.9, 94.1, and the News Talk STL app. Get familiar with that app, by the way, because in terms of this show, if at any point you miss some of it, say you're listening right now, but you got to duck out in an hour, you missed the whole second half of the show, don't worry about it, because Monday morning we always post the show on the radio station app at NewsTalkSTL.com. Easiest way to take care of everything. Then you just look for the show, you click on it, and you can listen to everything. So, Halloween is on Friday. I have more to say about that in just a little while. As always, we begin the show with a weekend pickup, a collection of goofy-ass stories that may have flown under the radar over the last couple of days, and we pick them up and we throw them at you. Kylie Jenner's dog died. His name was Norman. My question, did the dog die from embarrassment? Jimmy Kimmel says it was almost Jon Stewart doing his show on ABC. Apparently, ABC was very close to doing a deal with Jon Stewart a couple of years back, and then Jimmy Kimmel's name got tossed into the fray. And they ended up choosing Jimmy Kimmel because he was a lot cheaper. At least that's the story that Jimmy Kimmel tells. There is a docuseries on Martin Scorsese that is going to be available for you to view here very, very soon. Joe Pesci is not part of it. He refused to be interviewed for the new docuseries. Apparently, he doesn't like talking about those sleazy criminals he's played because they're based on people he actually knew. Baltimore Ravens fell to 1-3. Now, there's all different ways to coach a sports team, but we're going to just talk about football here. Sometimes you have the strong, silent type like Tom Landry. The Tampa Bay Bucks head coach stands on the sidelines and rarely shows any emotion, very stoic. So you got guys like that. Then you got guys like Pete Carroll, who, sometimes they think he ought to be in uniform. He's on the field so much, and he's running up and down the field and jumping up and down everything. There's more than one way to do it, and you can be successful or, for that matter, very, very unsuccessful, regardless of which style you possess. Well, John Harbaugh didn't like the fact that his team fell to 1-3, so he pulled the ping pong tables, the basketball hoop, cornhole boards, and a video game console system from the locker room a couple of weeks ago. Now they're 1-5. They play the 4-2 Chicago Bears on Sunday. Let's talk vacations, and not like, Jamaica. By the way, stay the hell out of Jamaica, the whole Caribbean for that matter, because that hurricane is going in there and it's just going to basically park over that whole region. And they're talking about 20, 30, maybe even 40 inches of rain in the Dominican Republic, parts of Haiti. Oh, that's all they need. People got vacations booked and cruises and stuff like that. That stuff is all going to have to be canceled or, have to go somewhere else. That's why for the big trips, for the big ones, it really does make sense to get that insurance, and a good insurance policy too, because some of them, you think you're covered for virtually anything, any eventuality, and you're not. But good idea to get the insurance policy because, usually it's like, somewhere between like maybe $60 and $120. I'd rather pay that money up front than have my whole vacation screwed and then end up with nothing, including none of my money. But the best explanation that I've ever heard on why some people don't take vacations, and in the late night television talk show host business, it makes a lot more sense, this thing I'm going to tell you that Jay Leno said years ago, but it looks like it's starting to apply more and more throughout the entire business community. Jay Leno said it's like, say you're in a race, okay, and they fire the gun and everybody starts running, and you run and you run and you run, and then you say, I think I'm just going to go sit on the curb for a little while, and all the runners eventually just disappear out of sight. And then you say, okay, I think I'll get back in the race, and now you're running, but you are way behind everybody else. And maybe that's the reason why 23% of employees did not take a single vacation day in the past year. There's a lot of reasons, including workload, team culture, and unclear expectations, whatever that means. Translated, people are terrified of losing their jobs. It's like, I have two friends who are in Turkey right now, and I said, did you not see the movie Midnight Express? Are you nuts? I think he got mad at me because he said, well, it's a good thing we didn't consult with you before we planned our vacation. And then a bunch of pictures started coming back. I had no idea the country of Turkey was as breathtakingly beautiful as it is. Holy crap, you should see these pictures. Unbelievable. If you go to the Flatirons in Colorado, or if you go to Arizona, especially Sedona, you'll see things that you're like, I can't even believe this stuff is on this planet. But you find yourself being very thankful when you go on a trip to Sedona that it's good. I'm really, really glad that I saw this because it's breathtaking. Well, the pictures my friend Scott sent me, Turkey, that's all there is all over the place. These rock and mountain formations that are just unbelievable. But I'm sorry, I can't get those images of William Heiss, and the torture in that prison. God, keep me the hell out of Turkey. But a lot of people won't go because they think that when they come back, all their stuff's going to be in a box. That's the end of that job. At the same time, we're creating ticking time bombs for people who have no recreational time, who don't have vacation time. If I was running a company, I would make vacations mandatory. I got to talk with Skip Weber about this. The color of cars, and Skip and I in our segments have talked about all different aspects of the car business. And, one of the things they talk about all the time is people come onto the lot with an idea of a car they want, but they see something else and they're like, oh my God, that's much better than what we were going to get. And a lot of times it is color. New study has found that white cars retain their resale value the best. Blue cars and black cars lose it the fastest. A lot of it's got to do with how well you can keep your car clean and dirt. You'd think, it's counterintuitive. You would think that a white car would always look dirty, and it's not the case. It's the dark-colored cars that show the dirt more. If you ever talked about having a buttload of something, and Laurie Mack used to talk about that all the time, and I stole it eventually because I just think it's so funny. Oh, I got a buttload of those things. If you're using that term, be careful, because a butt is a real unit of measurement. It amounts to about 108 imperial gallons, which comes out to about 130 American gallons. And if you're like me, you've never heard of imperial gallons, but we're learning. It's not common now, but it was once used for casks of liquids like wine and whiskey. When you'd fill out the barrel up, you'd have a buttload of wine, though you'd probably just call it a full butt, which sounds worse. If you're in the television sitcom business, the whole trick is to be able to stay on the air for 5 years minimum. Just if you can crank out 5 years, your show can be awful. But if you can just eke out 5 years, you're in the money, because then the show can be put into syndication, and that's where the money really starts coming in. Those reruns, that's where people make their money. In Major League Baseball, people thought the trick was to get to 10 years, because then you have a lot more say as to what ownership can do to you in terms of trades and things like that. But here's something I didn't know. If you're in the major leagues for at least 8 years, you get a gold card that gives you a guest free admission to any major league game for the rest of your life. There was a big scandal down here in Florida about a year ago, because you figure, oh, this is great. I moved to Florida, and those shrimp are just sitting right in the water. I can sit here on the pier and look and see where my lunch or my dinner is coming from, because every day they're out there gathering up those shrimp and all that other seafood. And talk about fresh. You sit down for dinner, the thing that you're eating for dinner was swimming around that morning. We thought. It turns out it's almost like a Federal Express thing. If you want to send a Federal Express package from Chesterfield to Belleville, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, they can't screw that up. It's just going across the river and everything like that. But every package goes to Memphis first. Even if you're sending it across the street, it goes to Memphis and then is sent out to its various locations and destinations. Well, it turns out that's what they do with the seafood, too. The seafood is gathered up, and you might even be sitting, like I said, sitting on the pier watching, and you're watching the boats grab the seafood. Oh, no, it goes to regional locations, and then those regional locations send the seafood out to the distributors and the restaurants and stuff like that. So you think that you're eating really, really incredibly fresh seafood that was just harvested that morning. You're not. And now we find out that Maine lobster actually refers to a species of lobster called Homarus americanus. That doesn't mean it came from Maine. They just mean it can come from as far south as New Jersey. I think we talked about this last week. Jim Carrey, we've barely seen him. When's the last movie Jim Carrey was in? I can't even remember what the last one was. I think he had some sort of mid-career crisis or something. He looked like hell. His hair was real long and greasy and everything. And he grew like one of those David Letterman beards. And he didn't look as good in it, by the way. And he was boinking Jenny McCarthy for a while. And then who else was he with? A long time ago, it was Lauren Holly. But I'm just talking about like within the last 5 to 10 years. Anyhow, it doesn't matter, because he is in talks to do a live-action movie, a version of the Jetsons, which means they got to cast somebody to be Jane, his wife, daughter Judy, Elroy, all that sort of stuff. And when we were kids and we watched the Jetsons, all we could think about is how cool this is going to be when we have flying cars. It's going to be great. And within the last couple of years, at various points around the country, I've watched it on the news. I didn't even think 60 Minutes did something on it where, there you go. And some of them are taxis. Some of them don't even have pilots. They're like giant drones. You just hop in and it flies you to wherever you want to go. My question is, knowing how people drive cars, how are we going to keep these things from crashing into one another? Won't be a problem at the very beginning because there's not that much stuff up there. But as the whole thing is progresses and it becomes more popular, and then you have more of these things, how do you keep them from crashing into one another? We'll get this story here. General Motors plans to launch an automated driving system in 2028 that will allow drivers to keep their eyes off the road and their hands off the wheel, starting with the Cadillac Escalade IQ. I don't know. I ain't convinced. All right, birthdays this weekend, a lot of big ones. Weird Al Yankovic, 66. That guy is a genius. And when I say that, I don't mean figuratively like he's a genius. He figured out how to make all this money doing these song parodies, although that is true. He is actually a genius. He graduated high school when he was like 14, went to college, and then graduated college when he was like 16. In high school, he was the valedictorian. He's a smart guy. And he's 66 this weekend. One of my all-time favorite singers, one of my all-time favorite bands, John Anderson of Yes, is 81. John Heater, Napoleon Dynamite, who was just in town a couple of days ago, is 48. Seth MacFarlane, another genius, 52. Hillary Clinton, the entire free world thought that the United States of America was going to have its first female president, and whoops! Pat Sajak, 79. Jacqueline Smith, 80, one of Charlie's Angels. The Jim Baker scandal really played out this weekend 36 years ago, back in 1989. 45 years in prison, $500,000 fine. Then they reduced the sentence to 18 years. He ended up only doing 5 years. When he was confronted about the $158 million that were just sort of missing, he came up with a pretty logical explanation. Who is responsible for it? Could it be, I don't know, maybe Satan? Thank you, Dana Carvey. Yeah, he said that Satan had got into his computers to make the money lost. When asked if he could prove Satan stole the money, he replied, "Can you prove he didn't?" Well, the world changed. 24 years ago, in 2001, Apple debuted the first iPod, and we lost Johnny Carson this weekend back in 2005. Undisputed king of late night from 62 to 92, and he did it when it was a lot harder to do. There's more competition now, but in terms of, he blazed the trail. Everything that everybody's doing right now is just a modern-day version of Johnny Carson.
And his lovable Art Fern.
Feature film freaks. Art Fern here with today's feature film. Woody Harrelson, Woody Allen, Woody Guthrie, Woody Woodpecker, Woody Herman, Herman Munster, and Dumpo, the Wonder Pigeon. In Heidi Suffers an Estrogen Avalanche.
2, 1, music tape.
From Hollywood, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Isn't it just cool kind of just hearing the music again, hearing the theme song again? Ed McMahon, welcome to St. Louis. How are you doing?
Oh, what a great introduction. What a package you put together there. That was terrific.
You know, Ed, you've really kind of been functioning as the unofficial press secretary for Johnny Carson, especially after the Heart episode. Can you tell us from what you know about it, what happened to Johnny? And I guess Johnny really does kind of recognize that you are the guy that kind of tells people how he's doing.
Oh, yeah, he knows that, and he appreciates that. He talked to me on my birthday a couple of weeks ago, told me a great joke I'd love to tell you, but why put your show off the air? All right.
And it was people like Johnny and especially Steve Allen who are really responsible for the entire late night talk show format. Steve Allen broke my heart. He was my hero. I wanted to be Steve Allen. And then, late in life, he really whacked out, man. He was taking out full-page newspaper ads, but they're not cheap, preaching all this moralistic stuff. And it's like, oh, man. Seems like that happens to a lot of people that you think are normal. And then they get to be like, 75, 80 years old, and they start spewing stuff that makes you wonder, what in the hell are you talking about? And they pulled the plug on our show on K-Hits back on this date in 2009. Nobody did anything wrong. The company was taking on serious water, and they were laying people off left and right. The only person who got, laid off that anybody paid any attention to was me, even though Katie Cruz got whacked the same day. And in that month alone, something like 14 people were laid off because company was like, well, okay, what do you want us to do? You want us to cut back like 5%? And the guys at corporate were like, no, you got to cut back like by 30%. It didn't work. Over the course of the next, I guess it was 2 years, they went further and further down and ended up having to sell the station. You know that we were playing, classic rock songs. We were playing Bad Company and the Stones and everything like that. And then after they laid everybody off, it was any good, got rid of the morning show, ratings just took a dive. Even their website hits, just diminished to basically nothing. Like I said, they eventually went out of business and had to sell the station. But in those last couple of months, I still remember the guy who was responsible for putting the music on the radio stations in that broadcast group said, yeah, you were playing Bad Company and the Stones. We are now playing Eddie Rabbit. And then that didn't work after a couple of months. And the next thing they were doing, they were playing Blind Melon. You're going to give the listeners vertigo. We're over here. Now we're over here. Now we're over here. Now we're over here. Just sell it, which is what they did. And tomorrow is the 5-year anniversary of me going in for outpatient surgery. Yeah, come on in. We're going to take care of you here, and then we're going to send you home in the afternoon. I'm like, that's fine. I ended up being in the hospital for 3 weeks with internal bleeding. I was getting something called a Urolift, which has to do with the prostate and urology and all that sort of stuff. Although it sounds like something you'd find at a ski lodge in the Alps. I think I'll just hop on the Urolift. No, that's not what it is. And I could get really, really graphic with you about my 3 weeks in the hospital, about what was happening with these blood clots and everything, but I don't even like to think about it myself. But I will tell you that after about the first 7 or 8, I started keeping track of how many different people in that hospital at some point in the 3 weeks had touched my junk. And it turned out to be 28. 28 complete strangers at some point during my hospital stay touched my junk. Nothing like that had happened to me, well, since Carly Intern's bachelor party. Good morning, everybody. All right, that's the weekend pickup. That's how we start the show here every Sunday on JC's Sunday Showgram. You're going to hear stories today about 3 people who you probably liked, who were in reality dicks, and you just didn't know about it. You're going to hear a story about how I was almost killed, and completely unrelated to that. When you're young and you're in the business and you're trying to make a name for yourself and you sort of are asked to do lots of things, and because you're young and you're stupid, you go, yeah, I'll do that. If it's publicity for me and for the radio station, fine. I'm trying to build a name here or whatever. Like, okay, you're going to wrestle a bear. And you're like, what? And also we're debuting our new feature, something called It Sucked Then and It Sucks Now. This is JC's Sunday Showgram on 101.9, 94.1, and the News Talk STL app. Back in a minute.
And now, in a desperate attempt to fill 24 hours of programming, here's some bullshit that happened somewhere today. We've got some footage here of the bullshit, which began just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, when residents in this neighborhood were shocked to see this fairly common thing happening. An attractive witness described the event in breathless terms.
I went to my window and I was like, whoa, there's some bullshit happening.
That happened right over there. I'm an older man, so you can trust what I say.
Authorities in special uniforms rushed to the scene to stand around while our cameras filmed them. Our reporter Keith Collins joins us now live from the scene of the bullshit through the use of expensive technology. Good to be with you again, Keith. We have a colorful graphic here that shows instances of bullshit like this are on the rise. Is that right?
Yes, although why is unclear. Some say it's because of one reason. Others say it's because of some other reason. I talked to this random expert on the subject who told me this thing you're about to hear him say right after he points at a piece of paper.
I spent my entire life attending the nation's most prestigious schools to talk about like this. I'm really just happy to be on TV.
Now let's see if we can drag this out a little longer by showing emails written by some of our viewers. I once saw some stuff kind of like the shit you're talking about happen. I have nothing more to add. Another person says, I am angry that things like this happen. I get mad about every bullshit thing. I see obviously a lot of opinions there to make this story seem somewhat meaningful.
Oh, absolutely, Glenn. This bullshit has some broader implications. Here's a list of tips on how to avoid bullshit happening to you.
And here's some footage of Congress.
Yes, I see that.
Well, thank you, Keith. Let us know if there are any updates on this bullshit story from there.
There's no way there will be.
Very good. We'll check back with you in an hour anyway.
I'm just some guy.
When we return, we'll look at live footage of a car chase taken from a helicopter and free associate about what's going on.
It's JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL.
The new Springsteen movie is out this weekend, Deliver Me From Nowhere. And again, you have idiots out there running around calling this a biopic, which, by the way, I guess is better than some of the people I've seen on St. Louis TV who are just reading off the prompter and they are not paying attention to anything and they just read, and the new Bruce Springsteen biopic. Biopic is not a word. It's a biopic. I always want to grab these newbie newscasters and say, okay, you read that thing and you said biopic. What's a biopic? Just to see what they would say. And by the way, it's not a biopic. Just like the Timothy Chalamet movie about Bob Dylan, which only focused on about 5 years of his life when he first got to New York. That's not a biopic either. And the Springsteen thing is only about a 2-year period in his career, and not even the part that made him famous, or that a lot of people found interesting, for that matter. You got to be a die-hard Springsteen fan to like the Nebraska album. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying the people who like Dancing in the Dark and Born in the USA, I don't think are the same people who like the Nebraska album. And the movie's getting very mixed reviews, by the way. That's my hometown, and this is JC. This is the Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL, 101.9, 94.1. We're here every Sunday morning from 7 to 9 o'clock. Anything you miss goes to podcast tomorrow on the News Talk STL free app. All right. I remember when I was doing the morning show with Close years ago, and we got into this discussion about, have you almost ever been killed? And Close told a story about he was getting gas somewhere in South City. This was, decades ago. And I think it was late at night, and he's out there pumping gas. And he got caught in the crossfire of a gunfight at a gas station. Bullets were flying past his head and everything, and he thought this is going to be it. Fortunately for Close, and if you remember this back in the 1970s, Close had a hairstyle and a hairdo that was basically Kevlar, and bullets were deflected by this hair thing. He had this swirly top. Tragically, he survived. No, I'm just kidding. He was not hit, and, it does make you think. Especially when you get up the next morning, you're like, was that a dream? And you do start thinking about your own mortality. I think that's just human nature. When you have a brush with death, you sort of sit there and you think about it for a while. And you think about all of the different implications. And you think about how life would be different for your family and your friends and your loved ones and everything like that if you had been mowed down. For me, the closest call I ever had was Christmas night, 1977. I was working in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and my parents were still living on the south side of Chicago. So I drove home. It's about a 3-hour drive from Fort Wayne to Chicago. We had Christmas dinner, got there a couple of days early, and then, but I had to work the next day. So, that was the thing about radio back in those days. There weren't a lot of days off because there was no digital technology. You needed a live human being sitting there at the control board spinning records at that time. There was no way to replicate that unless you pre-recorded an entire show on reel-to-reel tape, which was a very clumsy process. So translated, the day after Christmas, we expect you at work. Now, Highway 30, when you get into northwest Indiana, Highway 30 goes east and west, and it's 2 lanes in each direction. And then in the middle, depending on where you are along Highway 30, and this was in Valparaiso, Indiana, depending on where you are, there's usually a fairly large divide between the 2 lanes going in each direction. In this particular case, there was actually sort of a gully, because it sort of went down on a slope. And I'd say it was maybe 30 or 40 feet wide. And I'm driving along, and it's about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And you know how it is when you're driving at night. Try not to get the highway hypnosis, where you start almost falling asleep, or where your senses become numbed a little bit because you're just sort of driving along and it's dark and there's nothing to see and you're just listening to the radio and you're just driving along and you realize I still got 2 more hours to go, and so you're just driving and you're driving and you're driving. And as I'm driving through Valparaiso, Indiana that night on Christmas in 77, you just sort of, you get this idea. Your brain is telling you something's not right. What's happening here? Something just doesn't seem like it should be. The only problem with that is everything I just said in the last 10 or 15 seconds happened within a split second. So in that split second, my brain is telling me something's not right, something's off here. What's right? But you can't quite put it together. But all of that happens in like a quarter second. And when that quarter second was up, I saw 2 headlights coming directly at me that appeared to only be about, 50 feet away. And I just grabbed the steering wheel and yanked it to the left. I go off the road. I'm bumping along like the Beverly Hillbillies. I'm going down. I'm off the road, and now I'm in that ditch. I'm in that gully after having, it was not a smooth trip into that ditch. And I'm just sort of sitting there for a minute like, what the hell just happened? Got a wrong way driver. And I just had to sort of sit there for a minute and think and sort of collect my thoughts, And a couple of seconds later, the passenger side door opens up, and it's just some guy who was driving along that night as well. And he thought that we actually had hit. He thought that I was involved in a head-on collision. But then he said, no, the guy's still driving. We're sending the police. I mean, this was 77. There were no cell phones, so I don't know how he was going to do it. But he said, we're sending the police. Maybe he had a CB radio or something back then. CB radios were pretty big back then. That was in the convoy days.
Mercy sakes alive. It looks like we got us a convoy.
And so I'm just sort of sitting there. And, of course, the dome light is on because this complete stranger who was coming down the hill to check on me down in the ditch, when he opened the door, the dome light went on. Now, the part that I haven't told you about this is that my mother, as mothers do, sent me home back to Indiana with a lot of food from Christmas dinner, a lot of turkey and stuffing and gravy and potatoes, which were all sitting on the seat. But the violent nature of me going off the road, down the hill and into the ditch and all that bumpy stuff was that all that food went flying all over the inside of the car. It was on the seats. It was on the dashboard. It was on the window. And when this guy, after this poor guy had looked at me to make sure I was okay, he sort of looked around like, what the hell you got in here? It almost looked like the scene from Pulp Fiction where they accidentally blow the kid's head off in the back seat. Except instead of blood and guts and bone and stuff like that, it was, stovetop. But here's the kicker. This is a kicker to the story. Here's the kicker. About a year later, I had busted my windshield, and I had to have the glass replaced. And again, it wasn't like it is now where, somebody comes to your house and right in your driveway, they repair your glass. They just take out the broken glass, put the new one in. In this particular case, you actually had to go to the dealership. And when I went to pick up the car, the guy was like, okay, here's your paperwork. And he sort of looked at me like, oh, yeah. We were going to ask you, when we took the old pane of glass out, behind the dashboard, there was like dried meat. What the hell? Why do you have dried meat behind your dashboard? And I told him the story just like I did you. See how special that makes you? Now, the second story, I exaggerated a little bit because I wasn't nearly killed in the process, but I guess I could have been. And again, this is Fort Wayne. And now it's a year later, it's 1978. You got to understand something. I was like 23 maybe at that time. And when you're trying to break into the business, you'll do anything because you're trying to build a name for yourself. And especially back then, you remember radio stations were always doing nutty promotions and stuff. And they would come to you and say, okay, we need you to go here. We need you to go there on the weekend. Sometimes they referred to them as appearances. J.C. Corcoran is going to appear at the circus. I don't even think, it wasn't like one of the really big ones like Barnum and Bailey. It was just like some sort of traveling bunch of gypsies that, had some elephants and tigers and stuff like that. And but it was Fort Wayne, so that was the best you would get. And so they say to me, there's going to be 2 promotions, 2 little special things that are going on. Which one would you like to do? Well, one of them was trying to catch a greased pig. They were going to release a greased pig in some sort of large cage or something like that, almost like a boxing ring. And it was going to be your job to try to catch this greased pig. And the entire audience in the arena would just guffaw at the hilarious antics of the disc jockey, the local disc jockey, running around this thing trying to catch the greased pig. I passed on that one. That went to my friend Diane Shannon, who actually worked in St. Louis for a while. But anyhow, so the other one that was available was, they said, we need you to wrestle a bear. I was like, squeeze me, baking powder. Like, the bear is old and he didn't have his claws or his teeth or anything like that. So you get in the ring with this bear and you wrestle him. And I thought to myself, I could do that. They're not going to put me in the thing if there is a chance of being killed. So it must be safe enough. But in my mind, I was still envisioning all sorts of ways that I could be crushed to death or something like that. It's like 800-pound bear. I don't know. So in the couple of weeks that it took before the circus came to town, I started asking people a lot of questions. Again, no internet. You can't look up how to disable a bear in a dictionary or an encyclopedia. There's no way to know anything. But somebody told me, oh, yeah, bears have really, really short front legs. So if you can keep the bear down on those short legs, then you could probably win. And so I was like, well, how do you do that? He goes, just push down on the bear's head. When the bear comes at you, push down on the bear's head. Keep him low. Keep the bear low. So sure enough, that's what I did. I get into the ring, and there's a guy, presumably some sort of trainer or ringmaster or something like that, and he's got a long stick, and he just sort of taps on the bear lightly as if to say, all right, go after this guy now. You know what to do. And I'm standing there, and the bear starts to crawl towards me, and I go over to the bear, and sure enough, I put my hand down on the bear's forehead, and I start pushing down. And believe it or not, it was true. The bear couldn't get up. And so now the trainer with the stick is telling me, no, you can't do that. It's like, where does it say I can't? I'm in a cage with a bear. I'll survive with whatever idea I can come up with. He's like, no, you can't do that. The crowd, by the way, is going crazy, okay? Because they're like, they didn't expect this. And they're roaring with laughter. And I think this is pissing off the trainer. This is not going the way he wanted it to go. So the bear comes at me again. And again, I put my hand on the bear's forehead. He can't get up. Now this trainer is hitting me with the stick. The stick is designed to hit the bear to make him do things. This son of a bitch is hitting me with the stick. And again, as I've already identified, everybody involved with this circus looked like they had just been paroled that afternoon. And this guy starts looking at me with piercing eyes, the kind of eyes that suggest to you that at some point this guy may have taken a life. At that point, I just gave up. The bear knocked me down, sat on me, and that was the end of that. This is what it was like for young broadcasters trying to get into the business, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So for everybody along the way who developed a little resentment towards yours truly over the years, he's always flying around talking to movie stars and beautiful actresses, and he gets free concert tickets. What makes him think he's so special that he deserves all that? Yeah, well, when you were coming up in your business, did you have to wrestle a bear?
It's JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL.
Top 10 excellent game costumes. Okay. Here we go. All right. The number 10 excellent babe costume is going as a cat. All right. Form-fitting cat suits. Papa likes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Number 9 is a nurse. Call Randy Mantooth. Rampart, I need help. Okay. Right. Number 8, Nancy Culp, who played Miss Hathaway on TV's The Beverly Hillbillies.
Ew, Miss Hathaway?
Yeah, well, I just sort of put her in there to clear the palate, you know, sort of like, like a chick sorbet, you know. So, appreciate the other ones. All right, number 7, Pebbles Flintstone, all right? Bam, bam. All right, number 6, an Indian girl. Okay, all right.
All right. Sounded real.
Yeah, it got me scared. All right. Okay, number 5, a baseball player. You know, there's something about when a girl dresses like a baseball player because in her attempt at masculinity, that which is woman is underscored. Okay. Okay, number 4, private school girl.
Whoa, those plaid skirts.
Ow! Ow!
Whoa.
Ow!
Whoa.
All right, okay. Number 3, French maid. All right. Whoop. There we go. A may we. All right. Okay, number 2, Playboy bunny. I am thanking you. And finally, the number 1 excellent babe costume. Going as Heather Locklear.
Yeah. She's magically babelicious.
She's a babeaholic, and I should know I'm a licensed babetician.
I must interrupt the dance music for a moment. Early this evening, we broadcast a report of an invisible man. The report has now been confirmed.
Don't let him get me! A beautiful girl torn from the arms of her lover by a jungle beast.
What is it, this head that lives without a body?
The Howl of the Wolf movie.
Spine-tingling horror, unspeakable shock, and breathless excitement will grip you as you watch living organs ripped from the bodies of voluptuous females.
Well, what'd you expect? I'm a witch.
You knew you would be the first victim of your own curse.
No, that's not true.
Of course it is, Angelique.
All eyes turn toward the source of that chilling, compelling voice of pure evil.
No chains will ever hold that.
We'll give him more than chains. We'll teach him fear.
Hello?
Edgar.
Yes.
J.C. Corcoran.
J.C. Corcoran. I'm doing great, thank you.
There was almost something melodic about the way you said my name. So back in 1972, I think that's when a lot of people really became aware of you, even though you had had an entire career up until that point. And you had a song like, let's start with Frankenstein. And that song really does get treated almost as a Halloween song. When you guys put that together and recorded it, was it, in fact, intended to be mystic or in some way Halloween-y?
Not in the least. We completely forgot about the song for years. We played it at Woodstock. We played it at Albert Hall. And with the advent of the synthesizer, like the Beatles were using mellotrons. But as far as I know, Frankenstein was the first song to feature the synthesizer as a lead instrument. I love those old sci-fi movies like Forbidden Planet that had theremin and primitive synthesizers.
Oh, a theremin.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
That's the one, JC. And so my whole approach was, this is a brand new instrument. Let's see if we can create, new, unusual, unique sounds that no one has ever heard before. But we had no intention of recording the song, and we just called it the instrumental. It was like 15 or 20 minutes long. And when we recorded our first album, They Only Come Out at Night, it was naming the song Frankenstein that sort of precipitated the title of the album. We thought Free Ride would probably have the best chance of being a hit. It was toward the end of the project, and back in those days, recording was very different. There was nobody looking over your shoulder. I was talking to Rick Derringer, and he said, hey, maybe we could edit that into something, that would be usable. I felt like the strength of the Edgar Winter Group lay in the co-writing between Dan Hartman and myself, and as I said, we really believed in Free Ride. I said, it's a crazy idea, but I love crazy ideas. So back in those days, the only way to edit something was to physically cut the master tape. It was in pieces, lying all over the control room, draped over the backs of chairs and on the recording console and all over the couch. And then Chuck Ruff, the drummer, mumbled the immortal words, "Wow, man, it's like Frankenstein." And Rick said, "Well, there's your title." And I said, "I don't know if I want to be associated with the Frankenstein monster." And I thought about it a little. I said, "Well, actually, I'm like the Mad Doctor, and then the song is Frankenstein, the monster creation." So, the imagery of it, just like when you hear the song, you can see Frankenstein. It's amazing, There was no intent of that, but it really is, the perfect title. So the monster was born.
Edgar Winter, just an absolute pleasure to reminisce and talk about some of the old songs and talk about what you're doing now. And best of luck to you, and thanks for all the great music over the years.
You are most welcome, JC. Okay.
All right, bye-bye. Yeah, Halloween is coming up on Friday. That's going to screw up everything because by Saturday, which is the night you would love to have Halloween on, everything will be over. Worst thing you can do is try to have Halloween on Saturday after it's all been over on Friday. But there will be people who will make that mistake, and they're going to be very surprised when nobody shows up. All those years I was doing those celebrity interviews in New York and California, and I interviewed something like, it's somewhere in the vicinity of 3,000 celebrities in my career, most of that happening on those film junkets to Hollywood and to New York. It's about 3,000. And one of the reasons they liked me on these trips is because I would ask a question that they hadn't gotten before. You're sitting with John Travolta, and everybody has asked him something about Saturday Night Fever or Pulp Fiction or whatever. And I would say something like, when you were doing Welcome Back, Kotter, what sort of hair products did you use to get that hair all in that big pompadour? So they liked me out there, and I would throw questions at people. You just never knew what you were going to get, so I'd go fishing a lot, if you know what I mean. And one of the times it really paid off is when I was talking to Sandra Bullock.
And here we are with Sandra Bullock. So the movie is coming out on Halloween. You got candles behind it. It's very mystical and everything like that. What kind of a Halloween kid were you? Did you start thinking about it in July and start making your costume?
Oh, yeah.
Or were you at Woolworths at 1 o'clock in the afternoon,
There was no Woolworths in our family. My mother made our costumes. And then as I got more extravagant with my ideas, my father had to start building them. Yeah, I was a pretty big Halloween kid.
How extravagant does it become?
He wanted to win that silver dollar at the prize every year.
Well, wait a minute. How extravagant can a Halloween costume get that Dad has to be brought in, like with a blowtorch?
The one that Dad built was, I love candy corn. And so I decided I wanted to be
Here it comes,
the
folks.
human candy corn. Shut up, Janine.
Janine?
Janine. So he built this huge contraption, huge candy corn, and had these straps where when I flashed the flashlight, it said trick or treat. And it had a little flap door. So I didn't have to dress up as it. I just put on the big candy corn. It rolled, and it was this huge thing.
How do you carry a candy bag?
I don't know. It was attached to the inside of the door where people put in the flap. I won.
I guess so. My God, bring in industrial light and magic for Sandra here.
So yeah, things were, my mother would make costumes out of toilet paper. I was a Martian one year. She took the 6-pack plastic things off beer cans, made a whole suit, and then took toilet paper rolls and put cellophane on the outside and then attached wires, and I won that year too.
Who's giving away these prizes, by the way?
The schools. You go and you have to compete. Young kids compete. I was young. You had to get, your mom wanted to win the prize.
Gotta compete.
My favorite part of that conversation, by the way, is when she said, "Shut up, Janine." Poor Janine. Off in the corner. All right, it's been an interesting week, and not in a good way. Even though I ended up doing radio and goofy morning shows and everything, I was trained as a journalist. I went to college, I got a degree, and that just wasn't the direction that my career took me in. Plus, back in the 80s, why make $37,000 a year when you can make $500,000 a year? Radio used to pay big money. It doesn't anymore, but back in the 80s and 90s, it did. But it's sort of like, maybe you were a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout and nobody ever knew that. Now you're 50 years old and some kid is choking or something. You go over and do the Heimlich because you learned it as part of scouting. So you never really know what training people have. I've tried to explain to people that when I post something, I already know it's true. I'm not speculating. I'm not guessing. If it's an opinion, I say it's an opinion. Otherwise, it is fact. There's only one problem. Sometimes when people don't like the story, they attack the messenger. And a lot of that was what was happening last week. Sorry, if you don't want the straight story, don't come to me. It just fascinates me when people who have no connection to the story, they don't work at the place where the story emanated from, they're not part of the industry, they don't know any of the people, they've never met any of the people involved, and yet they're telling me I'm wrong. Me, the guy who talked to the people directly who it involved. And then people start, impugning your integrity and calling you a liar. Well, all you have to do is just think about that for about 5 seconds. You realize what a stupid idea that is. I don't get in trouble for lying. I get in trouble for telling the truth. Historically, that can be proven. But you're not bothering me when you're calling me names. I've already been called everything you can think of. You'd have to be pretty creative to throw something at me that would knock me off my skates. So a while back, that psycho Beetle Bob died. And I feel bad for his friends and his family and everything. There's nothing good about that when somebody dies. But everybody starts doing these really, heartfelt, teary-eyed eulogies. And it's like, wait a minute. Just because he died, I'm not going to sit here and let you rewrite history, okay? The guy was a kleptomaniac. He was a liar. He was a giant pain in the ass. You would not believe how often this guy lied. And I was personally standing in world news one day when they tossed him out for shoplifting. And he used to do it all the time. And was always mooching. And he would tell people, I'm the program director of KSD. If you're just, some underling at the Fox Theater or something, you don't know. You figure that why would the guy lie? And so they give him free tickets. And he did that his entire life. And it drove all of us crazy, people who are actually in the business. And then he would get inside someplace like a theater, like at the Fox, and he would talk during the entire performance. He'd bring somebody along or meet up with somebody and sit there and talk during the performance, drive you out of your mind. Then we had a situation about 2 weeks ago where this radio guy who worked at one of these fringe radio stations down in St. Genevieve or something like that, and they're portraying him as some wonderful guy. And you know why you got that story? Because Channel 5 sent out the weekend weather girl to do the story because everybody else at Channel 5 has been laid off. So here, go do this story. She's like, but I only know about clouds. It's like, get out there and do the story. And so she got the wool completely pulled over her eyes by people who were just trying to get on television. And it was like, give me a break here. And again, it hurts people like me because I built my entire career on giving you the straight story. If you don't want the straight story, you're in the wrong place, which is why when we come back after the break, people are going to get mad at me because I'm going to tell you about a couple of people that you may have liked in St. Louis who in reality were dicks. And I will tell you why. It's JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL. And as I was just talking about a couple of minutes ago, a lot of the time, most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, the blowback comes from people who don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about. They got no connection to anything. They're not people who know any of the details of the story maybe you're trying to talk about. But boy, they got a lot of opinions, so you just got to sort of deal with it, let it roll off your back. People are always sort of surprised that on Facebook alone, it is approaching now 1,300 blocks. 1,300 people that I've had to block. I got like 30,000 followers. So frankly, I ain't going to miss the 1,300. But it is sort of fascinating to think that many people said or did something that really forced me on the position of having to say, sorry, you can't play in my sandbox anymore. Part of the problem is I talk a lot about celebrities, and I talk about local celebrities, and I name them by name. That is where the trouble comes in, because a lot of people, if they're talking about somebody, a certain sportscaster from a certain television station that involves the number 2, that sort of stuff. I just tell you who I'm talking about. That irritates a lot of people. Oh, and if you ever wore a Cardinal jersey at some point in your life and you start talking about that person in a less than flattering light, oh, man, people just start jumping up and down like they're on a damn trampoline. So for years, I had heard Tim McCarver in some capacity. He had television shows. He was doing the Mets games. He eventually ended up in St. Louis. Like I said, he had a couple of TV shows. He wrote a couple of books. Sometimes he'd be on the late night shows or on the sports channels or whatever. And I always thought to myself, he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He seems like he's a little maybe too entertained by his own comments and his own jokes. Spends a lot of time laughing at himself. So when the whole Mets or pond scum thing started to come up and he started paying more attention to New York, I had heard stories from reliable sources that a lot of these quips, a lot of these little humorous attempts at comedy were actually written for him by comedy writers. Not very good comedy writers, but comedy writers nonetheless. Derek Jeter hits a home run. Maybe he's doing a national game or something like that. Derek Jeter hits a home run. Nothing is sweeter than a home run for Jeter. You know, that kind of crap. First of all, you should be able to come up with something like that on your own. And I just hope he wasn't paying these comedy writers too much money because they weren't very good. So then once at a Cardinal game, Tim McCarver was roaming around on the field before the game, and I walked up to him. I had my microphone ready, and I just said, a friend of Joe Buck and blah, 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 blah. I'm doing a story about baseball players knowing when it's time to retire. It's a subject that almost nobody talks about. And I talked to everyone. I talked to Red Shandings. I talked to Al Raboski. I talked to Tony La Russa, Walt Jocketty at the time. Anybody I could think of who might have some particular insight on the phenomenon of an athlete knowing when it's time to hang it up. So like I said, I approached McCarver, told him I was a friend of Joe Buck. Couldn't have been nicer. Gave me the greatest interview. Just, we had a couple of laughs, blah, 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 whatever. A couple of months later, it's the Cubs-Cardinal series at Wrigley Field in Chicago. And I'm listening to the broadcast up there in the press box with my headphones on. And at Wrigley Field, they had a woefully underestimated need of bathrooms in the press box. In fact, there was only one. And so I was listening to the broadcast, and McCarver said something, and he didn't know the answer to something he was talking about. I happened to know the answer, so I figured, you know what? I'll wait until between innings, and maybe I'll stick my head in the TV booth and go, hey, that guy you were talking about, here's the information you were looking for. I happen to know. Well, as fate would have it, he comes blowing out of the broadcast booth and heads straight for the bathroom as soon as the inning's over. And so I just walk up to him. He's got to stand in line because there's already somebody in the bathroom. By the way, McCarver's got his pants open already. He's got his belt off, zipper down. He's standing there. He's just holding his pants up with his hand. I mean, his thing is practically hanging out. But like I said, I had just talked to him a couple of weeks prior to that. I went up to him and I was like, hey, by the way, Tim, blah, 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 whatever that information you're looking for. And he just stood there looking at me as if to suggest, who in the hell do you think you are coming up and talking to me? And I just sort of stood there like, excuse the hell out of me. Well, then I started asking questions, and then people started telling me stories about what McCarver is really like, including during the ball games. During the game, while the game is going on, he's on the phone trying to make restaurant reservations for after the game. And apparently in this one particular case, the restaurant was telling him that, sorry, we don't have anything open. So he gave somebody else the phone and said, call again and tell him who the reservations are for. Say they're for Tim McCarver from the St. Louis Cardinals. Tell him that. Say that. And the poor kid is standing there, and they're still telling him, I don't care if the president shows up. We don't have any tables tonight. It's like the old joke. The maitre d' says, I'm sorry, we don't have any room for you tonight. The guy says, you're trying to tell me if the president of the United States showed up at your restaurant tonight, you would not be able to seat him? And the maitre d' says, well, if the president of the United States showed up, that would probably be a different case. We'd probably figure out some way to accommodate him. He says, well, I happen to know for sure he's not coming tonight, so give me his table. Hey, it's better than the jokes McCarver was telling. But that's a whole sports culture. It's that whole sports culture. And nothing was worse, nothing, than the 20 years that the St. Louis Rams were in town. It was the most arrogant, self-absorbed people I think I've ever run into. I've been around sports my entire life. And in locker rooms and press boxes and behind the scenes and talking to athletes and everything like that, that you've heard the stuff. But the Rams took things to completely new levels. Now, every Wednesday was media day. And you'd go over there about, I don't know, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and the Rams would be coming in from their morning practice, and they're in the showers, and they're standing around, roaming around the locker room, and you would go in there and have your microphone out, and you would try to talk to, Grant Wistrom, or most of the time Kurt Warner talked to the media without much trouble. But a lot of the guys hid. A lot of the Rams players, they didn't want to talk to anybody, so they hid. I know that. I know that because once I forgot something in the locker room. I had left. I had to come back about 5 minutes later. And what was a sparsely populated locker room when we were in there with the media, suddenly you couldn't even move in the place. 5 minutes later, once they saw the media left, they all came out from their hiding places. And they looked at me like, oh, no. I was like, don't worry, boys. You just got to grab a clipboard and I'll be back out, And the Rams set us up a couple of times. Karen Kelly and I went in there once on media day, and one of the things they do is they feed everybody. They feed the players and they feed the press. But they didn't like the press, and they especially didn't like the St. Louis media. They just thought that everybody in St. Louis, they just thought we were all a bunch of hayseeds. Now, in their defense, a lot of people, especially in St. Louis media, are hayseeds, but not everybody. So Karen and I were done with what we were doing, and so we were like, let's just get something to eat and then get out of here. And so we went into the cafeteria, and we loaded up our plates, and we sat down and we're talking, and they sent a guy out from the Rams public relations department to yell at us because it's like, you can't eat before the players eat. It's like, fine. I have no problem with that. Actually sounds like a good idea. The only problem is nobody told us that. And I watched you watch us go in there and put the food on our plates and go sit down, and only then did you come over to yell at us. You could have very easily stopped us before it happened and said, hey, guys, wait, can't eat before the players. Fine. Tell us that. Which brings us to Jack Snow. I don't even know where to start on this guy. You want to talk about a phony. Jack Snow, former Rams player, actually had a couple of cameos in the movie Heaven Can Wait. And everybody knows that because normally he would bring it up in the first 15 seconds of conversation. So his official job was color analyst for the radio broadcasts on KLOU, Rams Radio Network, which is where I was working at the time. And I did stuff with Kurt and Brenda Warner. I did stuff with Dick Vermeil. I did the pep rallies and the pregame shows and all that sort of stuff. I did all that stuff, but they didn't like me. And you're not going to believe why. KLOU at that time was an oldies station. It was playing like, the Beach Boys and the Young Rascals and precious and few are the moments we two can share. That sort of stuff. And they were big oldies fans. And when they hired me and Karen and Schlanger and Brian McKenna and the other people who were in there, when they hired us to do what we do, that cut down the music by about, a third. And that got them all bent out of shape. We want our oldies. So excuse me for trying to do an entertaining radio show, and to do so, you have to turn the friggin' mic on and say something. To buy a jukebox. And these guys even went so far as to try to have my press credentials revoked. I didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't like me because I was hired to do the morning show. And they also didn't like women hanging around. My old producer, Judy Martin, was hired to do the production, the booth production, because you actually have a couple of different producers when you do a big radio broadcast. And she was the booth producer. And these guys did not like the fact that a woman was hired for this job. So they would set her up. At halftime, Snow would disappear, as all the broadcasters do. You go to the bathroom, you have something to drink, get a little bite to eat, sort of look over the statistics from the first half, and then you come back to the booth a couple of minutes before the start of the second half. Well, Snow, just to make Judy look bad, did not come back in time for the start of the second half, and then made it look like it was Judy's fault. He did it on purpose. But my favorite story about Jack Snow had to do with the USA Cable Network. Do you remember that? The USA Cable Network? And every Friday morning during the football season, Jack Snow would fly to Las Vegas and do this half-hour football show. and was listed like a real football show, like real, analysis with predictions and all that sort of stuff, like a lot of stuff that's on TV. And that's how it was listed. But when you watch the show, Jack Snow's sitting in the middle, and on either side of him, he's got 2 guys. So it's 5 in total. And these 4 guys were all odds makers in Vegas.
You want some of this, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, you need to know the winners, and I know the winners. So call me now. Whoa! $5 for the first minute, $2 for each additional minute. You have reached the coach's hot
line.
Yeah,
lay it on me, Coach.
In the game of Miami versus
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Come on. Don't you realize this is costing me money?
We must consider many things. The wind.
Oh, not the wind.
Is blowing out of the west.
Oh.
At 5
miles per hour.
Knots.
Oh!
Yeah, every single one of these guys who was portraying himself as some sort of football expert was really there to promote their own 1-800 number where you would call up and they would tell you who was going to win and how to direct your gambling bets. Each one of these guys, by the way, looked like those guys you see on the news, single gunshot to the back of the head and stuffed in the back of a 98 Oldsmobile at the Newark airport parking lot. That's what they all looked like. A lot of hair transplants and fedoras and just cheap jewelry. And Snow would sit there in the middle and act like these guys were legitimate guys like from the NFL Today or the Fox NFL pregame show. It was an infomercial for gambling. And if that's the show you want to do, fine. But don't misrepresent what it is. It was like Dan Buck a couple of years ago on Fox Sports Midwest. He was doing something called the Manly Man Show or something like that. And he went around to all the media outlets all over St. Louis and talked about this brand new show that was going to be on Saturday morning. And it was going to be a great show, the Manly Man Show. And people were, that sounds like fun. It sounds so exciting. Get up on Saturday morning, turn it on. It's him selling spring training trips. Again, an infomercial masquerading as an actual show. Don't lie to people. But the mastermind behind everything, all the malevolence that was going on at Rams Park was a guy by the name of Rick Smith. It was a guy in his 60s. He had silver hair that was combed straight back, public relations director. And in fact, you probably have recollections of this guy without even knowing. When you would turn on the news and you would see Kurt Warner being interviewed or Mike Martz, this guy was always standing right behind them. But he wasn't looking to the camera. He was looking the whole interview, he's looking behind everybody like he expected some sort of an attack to take place. And he was like, look out. Maybe you'd be sort of sitting there trying to focus on what Kurt Warner or Mike Martz was saying. And you're like, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, who is this little silver-haired guy who's looking around like he expects some sort of an attack to take place? Well, this guy spent a couple of decades, because of his position with the Rams, he was in position to do this. He would get like an authentic football helmet from, let's just say it was the Rams. And they would get like one of those paint magic markers, and he would get Kurt Warner to sign it. And then this guy, Rick Smith, would take it back to his house in Los Angeles and store it in some sort of a room. And apparently he had hundreds of autographed memorabilia pieces, which he was going to then, one by one, during his retirement, he was going to sell these things one by one, thus not raising the attention of the Internal Revenue Service. Kurt Warner's getting inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I've got an autographed football helmet of Kurt Warner, $5,000. Okay, cash only. Boom. Sort of an ingenious plot, by the way, even though it was illegal. And why am I telling you this story about this little-known guy? Because he was really at the he was at the center of all of the malevolence, and the story, it turns out, has a happy ending. Because a couple of years after the Rams left St. Louis and went back to California, there was a fire at Rick Smith's house, and his house burned to the ground and melted or burned all of the memorabilia. So if you're ever in Southern California and you see this guy Rick Smith working the counter at a Chipotle, now you know why. Like I said, the story had a happy ending. This is JC's Sunday Showgram on News Talk STL 101.9, 94.1. Time to talk to our buddy Skip Weber at Weber Chevrolet, with whose cooperation this show and the Saturday night show called JC's Wayback Machine come your way. Skip Weber, Halloween coming up on Friday. When was the last time you dressed up?
Well, I've done a few Halloween parties. We actually dressed up last year.
Did you really?
We did. The older grandkids, we dressed up a couple times for them, but last year was his first one. So we dressed up in just some goofy costumes. It wasn't significant. And I remember when my own kids were rather young, we did the University Club in Brentwood that my parents belonged to, had a great Halloween party. I always enjoyed Halloween.
What was your costume when you dressed up last year?
I was a guy riding a dinosaur. So there was one of those, it was like an inflatable thing.
Yeah.
And it looked like, you had these fake legs on the side, and my legs were the dinosaur's legs. And I was on top of it. It was fun.
A couple of years ago, when my daughter was probably 5 or 6, I did dress up as a nun, and I did that just really to entertain her and the people in the neighborhood. I don't think I had dressed up in 20 years, maybe 30, maybe even longer than that. I don't know.
So let me ask you a question, JC. Let me ask you, we're talking about Halloween. When you were growing up, did houses make you tell a joke?
Oh, yeah. I still do it now.
Yeah, I do too. You have to tell a joke. I get told that must be a St. Louis thing, and I don't think it was.
No, absolutely not.
I have lots of people said, well, they grew up somewhere else and they didn't have to do it, but I remember episodes of sitcoms like Happy Days where they'd have a Halloween episode and they'd be talking about, and they'd be making the kids tell jokes.
Sure.
Now, if they're doing it there, that's not saying it's a Milwaukee thing. That was a national thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had it in the episode.
Well, that's funny you should bring that up, because when on that trick-or-treating thing through the neighborhood I was just talking about, my daughter was probably 4 or 5 years old, and she didn't understand the meaning of it, but she memorized it, and I said, here's your joke. So when you go to the door and people say, what's your joke? Here's what you do. And you got to remember this: the reason that this is as funny as it is because it's being delivered by a 5-year-old child.
Right.
But the joke was, what do you get when you cross an elephant with a rhinoceros? And the people, I don't know. And then she says, "Hell if I know." and people were like just spitting their coffee out and everything like that. Yeah. So it was pretty damn funny. Believe it or not, I was in Costco the other day, and it just, it felt like, oh, that's right, it's Christmas. Just unbelievable. We are about almost exactly 1 month away from Weber Chevrolet's long-standing tradition of Black Friday. Have you been already thinking about that?
We have. And I don't know if you remember this, but last year we did, our Black Friday was a weekly Friday up specials through the month. I feel that with the advent of so much by mail and online ordering of things, that the real Black Friday has lost some luster, and we do not put it all into one day or one weekend anymore. Last year's was the start of it. And we watched the stats of who came to Black Friday, even though we had just as good of deals every year, and we watched it going down. So we just said, you know what? We felt like maybe people would say, I'm going to wait till Black Friday and not buy the rest of November. And we just decided we're going to do it every Friday. And so last year we did it. It worked really, really well. So we're going to have, about 20 to 25 specials per store every Friday through the whole month of November. And no longer do we have people, have to get up at 5 a.m. to get here on Friday. But I am proud of the fact that we were the first and original, the only true automotive Black Friday. I mean, everybody tried to copy it, and they would do normal, ordinary specials that anybody could do all year long. And they'll have about 30 total that are all set up. All the programming's done. So all they got to do is pick 20 of those. And maybe they create a new one if something got surprising, but they'll pick 20 of those and put the prices in, and it just they'll have it done by Wednesday, for example.
So what is the date of the first Black Friday?
The first one will be November 8th.
Okay, so it is coming up.
Each Friday. So the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th will each have some great specials on.
And you can check the website, WeberChevrolet.com. 3 locations, Granite City, Columbia, Illinois, Olive 270, and online at WeberChevrolet.com. And for like service and delivery vehicles and stuff like that, you got that Ford dealership over in Metro East. Check that out too. Skip Weber, happy Halloween. We'll talk to you in a couple of days. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, JC.
JC's Wayback Machine. And now, you know it. I know it. It sucked then. It sucks now.
Even though we're only in our 3rd week of doing the Sunday Showgram, look at this. You're getting a brand new feature. It sucked then and it sucks now. For this one, we have to try to imagine what it would have been like in the 1960s, and you're a record executive. It is your job to evaluate acts, to evaluate records and music, and try to determine what those kids will like. What we like as adults isn't the same thing as what the teeny boppers like. And their job is to try to figure out what that was. And in this particular case, I can only imagine what the meeting was like. Sir, we have an idea. Okay, let's hear it, boys. Suddenly I'm talking like John Mulaney. So I guess it was the same sort of thing when somebody wrote, "She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes." The song was originally called "When the Chariot Comes," adapted by railroad workers in the 1890s. All right, I guess I can't blame them too much. They're just trying to kill time. But at some point, somebody had to have it copyrighted, and they went into the record company or the music publisher and said, okay, we got this brand new song. Okay, what are the lyrics? Well, it starts like this. "She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes." Okay, interesting. What's the second line? "She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes." No, I heard you the first time. What's the second line? No, that is the second line. Okay. We get this down. "She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes." All right, third line. "She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes." Get out of my office! That's what he should have said. And somehow that song is regarded as like American folklore? You kidding me? An American classic? So again, we're in the 1960s. Remember the harp? We're in the 1960s. And the record executive opens the door, and in comes a couple of guys, and they're like, we got a great idea for a new song. Okay, what are the words? All right, it goes like this. Everybody knows that the bird is the word. Bird, bird, bird. Bird is the word. Bird, bird, bird. Bird is the word. Don't you know about the bird? Everybody knows that the bird is the word. Record guy's like, are you sure, guys? Did you lose a page or something like that? No, that's the song. And even better than that, like right in the middle of the song, for no apparent reason, we're going to spaz out. Oh, what do you mean spaz out? We're just going to go blah, 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 blah. And somehow the Trashmen got signed to a recording deal, and the song was released, and it was a hit. It sucked then, and it sucks now. And like I said, don't forget the app now. If you missed any portion of today's show, starting tomorrow morning, you just go to the NewsTalkSTL app and click on it, and you can find the show, and you get the podcast version of what we do here on Sunday mornings. And don't forget, we're here every Saturday night playing music from 6 until 9 o'clock, and we play stuff that you know and that you love, but that doesn't get played on the radio anymore. No, it's not a classic show. There's enough of those things. I guess you just got to listen to figure out what it is, but people seem to like it, so we're going to continue to do it. That's JC's Wayback Machine, Saturday nights from 6 until 9 o'clock. All right, we got to go. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and in the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later.
Could you tell me? Bye-bye. I'm sorry, what? What part didn't you understand? The buh or the bye? Bye-bye.
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 How strange. I swear she said bye-bye, yet I still see your mouth flapping. I want to see motion, movement, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay?
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Bye-bye.
I don't get it.
There's nothing to get. Bye-bye.
Bye?